Okay, so when I was 19 years old, I had this idea and I created a model of the human heart, if you will. And by heart, I mean that spiritual side of us, if you will, the spiritual heart. So, if you think of this entire thing is the heart. Okay? Yeah, it's going to be backwards for you, sorry. All right. I had the will, the emotions, and the mind. And they were basically all facets of the heart. Okay? So the first, so what I did was, initially I had separated this as the body, the what I termed the soul, and the spirit. Now, my dad later told me, you have soul and spirit backwards, and I was like, no, I don't. But I guess my conception of the spirit as being like the life force or the breath of God, I conceptualized it as being impermanent or temporary. Like when we die, it just disappears, dissipates, it's gone, right? So so my conception of the spirit was, that it was not the eternal portion of us. My conception of the soul was that it is the eternal portion of us, and that was why I used the terminology that I did. And my dad told me apparently most people have that the other way around, and I said, well, I'm just using the terminology that I picked up from the Bible, so I don't know. It really doesn't matter, to be honest. It doesn't matter because I no longer assign that this way, and the reason for that is because after having done a study of the Hebrew and Greek words for soul and spirit, that model just those words do not mean the way they are translated in English. The Hebrew and Greek words for soul and spirit do not mean the same thing that the English translators or that our society has given to those words in English. So perhaps at the time when it was initially translated that way, perhaps the meaning was fine, but that meaning has changed in the English, and particularly has been captured by the philosophies of Plato, kind of taken and merged with Christianity, and it's not a good thing. Anyway, so I no longer ascribe body, soul, and spirit to this model, like I did it at one time. Okay. And I have my brother Nate to thank for shattering that conception that I had. Thanks, Nate. Okay. So, later what I did is I was looking at the 9 fruits of the Spirit, and I think what got it started was my understanding of love as an act of the will. And as I was looking at the fruit of the Spirit, I remember I was 19 years old. I remember this thought going through my head. Well, if love is an act of the will, well then I could assign love here. And I wonder if the other 9 or the other 8 could be assigned. And, having the sort of brain that I do, I set out to do exactly that. And then at some point in the next, what is that? Let's see, I'm almost 40, so that would be 21 years. I had this other thought, well, what I see at work inside of me and what I observe with other people and with the world is that these things have carnal opposites. And so I set about defining the opposites of the nine. And what are they? And how do the nine fruit of the Spirit and the nine carnal opposites interact between the will, the mind, and the emotions and each other? And I used scripture for this. And what it led me to, this is going to be the subject of my next book that I'm about to write. What it led me to is the necessity of suffering. That's going to be the title. The necessity. Actually, the title of the book is going to be The Necessity of Pain. Specifically, I'm going to be discussing suffering and lament. And lament as the purest and greatest form of worship. So that's going to be the subject of the book. But studying this model and looking at how Scripture sort of dictated I set this model up, specifically from Paul and Peter and their various layings out, I suddenly realized, wait, suffering goes here. And that opened up this whole world to me, and we'll get into that in some future videos. So love being an act of the will. But here's the thing. Our English word love is completely and totally inadequate to describe what that is. It's not our English word love, because our English word love has been so totally and completely misused that is not what it is. It is the Hebrew word hesed. Okay? The Hebrew word hesed. Now, the Hebrew word hesed is completely undefinable in any language other than Hebrew. People have tried. And I will grant you, there are some very good attempts. But it is not conceptual. Well, it is not, there is no equivalent word in any other language. Okay? So we can translate it in terms of, well, this is what it's like, or in this particular context, it's used with this sort of bend, right? So in a lot of translations, it'll be translated, in many places, it'll be translated as mercy. In the Psalms, it is almost always translated as loving kindness, because Coverdale, when he did his translation, he used the phrase loving kindness to translate the Hebrew word hesed. Now, and then people later on said, ooh, that's a really good translation, and they stole it. Well, they didn't really steal it. It was public domain, but you get the idea. All right. So, but it's translated multiple different ways throughout the Tanakh, the what we term the Old Testament, right? Throughout the Tanakh, the Hebrew Scriptures, it is translated in a multitude of ways into English because it's untranslatable, and the translators simply use the context to get sort of the idea or the particular bend or the particular facet of hesed, because it's multifaceted, that the author is going for in that particular context, and then they translate it in that way. So, hesed, Michael Card wrote an entire book on the word hesed, and I'm pronouncing it wrong, I know, it's chesed. You gotta give it like that phlegm in the back of your throat. But he wrote an entire book on it, and he, at the conclusion of his book, he said, look, the best way that I can define it, and he doesn't even take credit for it, he believes that someone else said it, but he found it in his notebook, he can't figure out who to attribute it to, so he refuses to take credit for it, but He doesn't know who to attribute the definition to. Anyway, he said the best way that I can come up with to define it is when Hesed is when someone from whom I have the right to expect nothing gives me everything. Okay? That is what it is. So if you could take our English concept of mercy, that is not giving you the punishment you deserve, and grace, that is not giving you the salvation or the favor that you don't deserve, and love, and maybe the sovereignty of God, and some other things, and squish them all together into one concept, you're getting pretty close. All right? Now, as far as the Greek goes, so the Hebrew word here to describe this center, I'm going to call them centers, 9 centers, is hesed. Chesed. The Greek word is going to be agape. Now, a note about the word agape. N.T. Wright points out that the word agape had a very sordid history. It was about as bad as our English word love. Okay, it did not mean what North American Western evangelical Christians believe that it means. Okay, it didn't mean that at all. But the writers of the Brit Chadasha, that is the New Covenant writings, or what we term the New Testament, the writers of the New Covenant writings, they're Jewish. They think in Hebrew. They're thinking in terms of Hesed. But it can't be translated into Greek. There is no word in Greek that is equivalent. And so they gave it a bunch of different words in the Greek. The one that really comes out the most, though, is agape. Okay? Michael Card and N.T. Wright both make the case that the New Testament writers, the New Covenant writers, basically took the word agape and redefined it, took it out of the culture, right? Took it out of the culture and redefined it in terms of their concept of hesed. Okay? So when we're talking about agape, we are talking specifically about hesed. All right, so that's what this is. This is love, but not love in terms of our English, American, Western concept of the English word love. Okay. I then had to think, okay, so what would be the carnal opposite of love? And I used a whole bunch of words to describe this thing I had in my head, but I did not have a name for it. So, some of the words that I used to describe what this thing was: envy, lust, desire, coveting. So I had these words, I had this idea, this concept. I kind of knew what the thing was, but I didn't know what to call it. All right. So, and now I do. Because the book Addiction and Grace by May, Gerald May, I believe it. I think Gerald is his first name. There's a sentence in there in the first or second chapter. I think it's in the first chapter. He says that the opposite of love, that addiction is the opposite of love. It is this removal of the freedom, the human freedom to love. And that blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. And I realized instantly that is the thing I've been trying to define here. So, this is addiction. All right. So I'm just going to write in here. Envy, lust, desire, and coveting. Okay. I'll put love in here in quotes. Maybe we can write all right. Hesed, agape. All right. Now, what I've always known is that there is this continuum between the two. And the war that's going on is moving us back and forth between these two on this continuum. That's kind of what Gerald May describes a little bit. And as I complete this model in future videos, you will see how there are these cycles that, as we go through either the cycle God takes us through or the cycle that the enemy initiates, it pushes us back and forth on these continuums with all 9 of these fruits. So, and then using scripture, we'll define how they interact with each other. All right, that's it for this video.